So first of all, this is being hosted by National Extension Climate Initiative. We call ourselves NECI. We serve as an anchor for extension professionals, researchers, and partners to collaborate on climate-related issues, share resources, discuss barriers and opportunities for advancing climate change programming and extension, and engaging professional development opportunities. We are 100% voluntary, so you are all welcome to join one of our working groups. There are 6 working groups, and what is being presented today is from the Curriculum Development Working Group. You can learn more about the National Extension Climate Initiative.net. This is our second in our inaugural series, Storytelling and Climate. We also have one on April 24th, DIY, Self-Guided Climate Instruction, May 22nd on different communities and co-created materials, and on June 26th, Aging and Climate. We're trying different formats of engagement. And so last month we had an open discussion presentation meeting style. And this month we're having 3 different speakers kind of do hot potato of ideation around how different people can do storytelling in order to engage others in climate. This is the event next month. You can, we'll put a link in the chat soon, so you can learn about the EcoActus DIY programming for next month. So that's a different kind of style. Just in terms of housekeeping, we reserve the right to mute participants to facilitate whole room engagement. This will be recorded and uploaded to our webpage roughly 7 days after the event. Only today, Art Nash will not be recorded. Each speaker will speak for 15 minutes, and then we will have an open discussion at the end. Please use the chat for logistical problems and use the Q&A for questions for the speakers at large, and that just allows us to winnow and redirect. We endeavor to start and stop on time. We will not read bios, and we aspire to be a resource of many resources from which you can draw upon for your own regional work. If you're inspired, we welcome you to join us, and you can learn more about our series, and we'll stick that in the chat soon too. Okay, these are our 3 storytellers for this week. And so with that, Janice, do you want to take over the slide deck?
Wonderful, thank you. So hello everyone, I'm Janice McDonnell. I'm at Rutgers University. I work for 4-H Youth Development and as Associate Professor and STEM agent, working with youth across our state and improving STEM education both in and out of school. So I'm very fortunate to work with 20 of our county agents in engaging young people in STEM programming. And as part of that work, we received an NSF grant right before the pandemic from NSF's ASL division, which is Advancing Informal Science Learning. And this allowed us to explore, as the topic of the day is, to kind of explore how do we tell the story of scientists who are going to Antarctica and thinking about climate change on a global scale, and how do we develop an enriching program that allows them to see that change over time, climate change in Antarctica, through the eyes of the researchers that go there. So we call this program Data to the Rescue. Penguins Need Our Help, and I'll share some of our lessons learned and how about telling this story. So my goal is to kind of give you a little bit of insight as to how we dealt with the data literacy piece, especially in an out-of-school time environment or after-school environment, how we got through this Data to the Rescue program, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions. But before we get into that, I kind of want to put you in the mindset of a typical 6th grade learner and how they may see data. So this is an activity that we use a lot to kind of develop some empathy for how kids feel about working with data and things that are unfamiliar to them, and how they go about orienting to that data. So this slide, and if you tried to answer these questions, where the most EMP was found, and how much EMP was found in VOOP in E per meter squared, and what causes the change in moving from west to east, you would feel a little out of sorts, right? Because you don't know what EMP is. You also don't know where VOOP is. You're looking at this map, and you may be able to go through the motions of seeing that the most EMP is found in this red area here, right along the Maladies, but you really don't know what that means, right? You're just sort of going through the motions of being able to try to orient to this data and figure out how to interpret it and how to synthesize this into some kind of meaning. And it can feel really overwhelming to kids. So this kind of puts us as educators in our place, right? To feel the pain sometimes that young people have. And in addition to that, a lot of young people are still recovering from that awful math class in high school, where they might have been told or might have felt that they're just bad at math. How many people have you met that have said, I'm just not a math person? And this is very common. We hear this even from STEM professionals that have sort of math and data phobia, if you will. But living through the pandemic, we also realized that there was a lot of opportunity, right, to bring data visualizations to help people understand circumstances such as COVID in our case, and how a simple visualization of the number of flu or COVID cases in the year could have a positive impact on how many people decide to take action and get a COVID shot, or maybe a chart showing the projected amount of food waste that could be diverted from a landfill could have an impact on the number of people who choose to participate in a composting program. So we do have opportunity here for that. So we define data literacy as the ability to read data, work with data, and communicate about data by putting it in proper context, right? So kind of the Venn diagram here of data literacy is sort of in the middle of the reading, working, and communicating with data. And that's what our program really strive to do. And more broadly, as extension personnel, which many of you probably are, in education research jobs, we really have to think about how we work with our stakeholders and how we get them to know where to start, right? That's the orientation phase, or how to make sense of what they're seeing and interpretation. And how does that relate to other things, right? In this case, on the slide, sea level rise, right? And how it might relate to where flooding might occur along the coast of New Jersey. So these things are really important to decision making, and we've been trying to make active strides in connecting the data to the story of how people can be impacted. So Data to the Rescue as a program started in 2018. And we went through many iterations of the project, trying to think about how we share this with young people. And we came up with this research club model where young people were encouraged to do self-guided exploration before they attended a face-to-face meeting where we called group exploration, a club meeting, if you will, after school. And then, of course, we provided opportunities for community engagement and connection and exploration. So that's kind of the model, if you will, of how we developed the architecture for this project. And one of the ways we did that, because it was developed during COVID, was this idea of postcards, right? Getting a postcard from the lead researcher and really telling her story, right? As a researcher who was going to Antarctica, who had to pack her bags and go to the poles and really research these penguins. So we had a series of postcards that the kids would receive at the beginning of the week that would give them little tasks to do online to mentally prepare them for their club meeting and how they might, in this case, join her team as a researcher and research why the penguins are declining along the Western Atlantic Peninsula of Antarctica. So this was the general flow of how we did that through this postcard system. And it worked quite well for us. We ended up teaching in many states across the country from the summer of 2020 to the spring of 2023. And you can see we really focused our energy on overburdened communities where there were high percentages of underrepresented minority students that worked on the project and helped us pilot it. So this just gives you a sense of the 13 states that participated in our program and the numbers that that we were able to engage in the project. So it was tested with quite a few kids, a little over 1,500 kids total. Most of them spanned between 5th and 8th grade as a point of context. And here's how we went about building the data story, if you will. This idea of helping them learn how to get data, explore data, and then infer meaning from the data. This was kind of the function, if you will. And we borrowed this from Kristen Hunter Thompson and Schaffler, who developed this framework that we were able to use in the curriculum development phase. They have this wonderful, and I highly recommend it, building data literacy skills, building blocks framework that we were able to access and really learn about what the expectations were for what kids can learn at different age levels as it regards to data skills. So what we ended up doing was picking these 11 data categories, 11 skills, and then trying to repeat them over the course of our 8 club meetings that you saw in that initial model diagram. And this was really valuable for us. We tried to touch on each of these skills at least twice so that the kids had a chance to master those data skills. And you can see they touch on those 3 categories, right? Of how to collect data, how to read, interpret graphs, and then finally how to synthesize that and make meaning from the data. And these skills range from 6th grade to 8th grade skills to really be in keeping with our target audience. So just to give you a few screen grabs here of what it looks like in the curriculum. This is one of the first activities the kids do to give them an experience with collecting data. We have them practice on fun-size bags of M&Ms, which they find fun and delicious. So this gives them a sense of how scientists collect and share data. They get a fun-size bag of M&Ms, and then they're asked to count those M&Ms and create a bar chart. So I just want to show you a quick 1-minute section of this video. I'll give you the URL that you can go and watch all of our videos. There are 6 of them that teach this program to after-school facilitators. But I just want to have you see the kids in action so you can get a sense of how they responded to it. So let me just play you this little clip.
In the M&M bag. Adrian?
I can see like green, red, and blue, also a little bit of brown.
Okay, a lot of the colors you see on your crayon package, right? Would you be surprised if you open up this bag that Miss Marissa's passing out and you had all orange? You would be. You think that might happen? Do you think we can predict the frequencies of colors in M&M's bags? We could do that. We could predict the frequency. Right?
Here we see learners working in small groups using M&M candies to emulate how scientists collect and share data. By sorting and counting the frequency of each color, they represent their observations in a bar chart. This M&M collection activity represents the same type of experimental design that would help scientists understand what is happening to the penguin population in Antarctica.
I'm going to stop it there for the sake of time, but again, I invite you to go and watch these videos back and just watch the kids interact with the data. This is one of our more successful activities, and helps them really orient and be able to have an experience collecting data, because obviously we can't bring them to Antarctica to collect their own data on penguins. There's also card games that help them understand X and Y axis relationships that they get on their postcard as tasks to do. They also have data stories that they can manipulate here to sort of understand the relationship and the decline of these adorable Adelie penguins. And most importantly, and again, I'm not going to play this for sake of time, there's a significant part of the curriculum that encourages them how to ask questions. And then my favorite part about this is the kids, because of their curiosity and a technique that we call the QFT, question formulation technique, they're able to end up asking the same kinds of questions that our research scientists are. And that's really empowering for them and really helps them feel like scientists and build their STEM identity. So we're actually very, very proud of that part of it. This is a crucial session in the 8-session program that kids really enjoy. The final part of the program is something we call a data jam. And this is where they learn how to communicate the science that they've learned, and some of their assumptions about why they think that's happening. So this connects them to being able to tell their story. If you're familiar with Katherine Hayhoe, who is a very well-known climate scientist who does a lot in science communication, she says that the most important thing we can do is talk to other people about climate change, right? And so we took that to heart here, and by having the kids create these accurate data stories, if you will, that tell the story of what's happening to the penguins in Antarctica in this case, they can then share that story in their communities and also make relational experiences by what's going on in their communities related to climate change. So this little graphic here shows a wall mural that one of our classes did, showing the progression of penguins from Adelie penguin decline from 1995 to 2010, and how you can see each penguin is a ratio of, each penguin represents 100 penguins. So they were able to each color their own penguin and show the decline over time of this Adelie population, and be able to talk about why they are so ice dependent, and that the decline of ice isn't, in fact, as you can see in their diagram, the ice gets smaller and smaller, is actually what we think relational to why the Adelies as a very ice dependent species are declining. So this is just one example. Kids did many, many different things, really a STEAM project, and integrating a lot of different forms of art. And it's something we're really exploring to help kids build their storytelling skills and really share their ideas about climate change through art. I think I just wanted to leave you with some food for thought. I'd be happy to hear questions that you still have. I know we have about a minute. Hopefully this has given you some ideas, or extended or broadened your thinking about how you might do this with a topic that you have in mind related to climate change. And hopefully this connects to your experiences as a climate educator. We had a lot of fun developing this project. I'd be, happy to share it with you. It's all online, and we're also going to be selling it through STEMfinity, which is a small curriculum development company that will put together all of the material. Here's how you can reach me if you'd like more info on that, or if you have specific questions. Certainly put them in the Q&A if you do, and we'll address them. But if you want to reach out to me for any reason, please feel free to do so at this email address. And I thank James and Jennifer for inviting me, and I hopefully that gives you another example of how to think about storytelling and climate change. So thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Janice. Before I get started with my part, we do have one question that I think you could probably field pretty quickly, so it'd probably be good to talk. We have Riwa asking, when and where was the wall mural of the Adelie penguins done? And they asked if you could just speak a little bit more about that project.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the wall mural was done in a public school, number 5, in Jersey City here in New Jersey. So a very interesting school, very innovative principal who was very open to collaborations with us and allowed us to come in and work with the kids. So just prior to doing the Data Jam, 2 things happened, which I didn't mention for the sake of time. One was that they got a video teleconference with Megan Cimino, who is the biologist who goes to Antarctica and tracks the penguin populations. And they shared their questions with her. And as I mentioned, their questions were very similar to her questions, which we love. They were related to habitat and maybe food source as potential reasons why the Adelies were declining. And this other species called gentoo penguins were increasing, moving into the space. And so habitat and food were very common reasons why they wanted to explore further. So she chatted with them a bit. We have since created a video, call to action video, that anyone can access instead of talking to her directly. But they spoke to her, and then she challenged them to create a data jam that would allow them to share what their questions are and their research results more broadly. So they came up with this wall mural as a group project. They had to learn about ratios. They had to learn that data skill, which was honestly challenging for them to figure out the ratios of how to get the data accurately represented in the wall mural. And in our curriculum guide, that process of creating the wall mural is articulated as an example. And then individual data jams are left open to the kids' their own creative devices, right? So it's sort of a uniting factor of creating the wall mural together to kind of bring everybody into the math skills they need, and then they can replicate with their own versions as individuals. So I will certainly post those links. I happen to have the curriculum right here, and I'll post the links for you for sure. Thank you for that question.
Okay. So I want to talk about how we can discuss climate change through interdisciplinary approaches. So as we saw through Janice's demonstration, we can help people and facilitate that kind of scientific thinking, but we can also approach discussing climate change from non-science angles in some ways. So, oops, is this going to go? There we go. So the background on why I got started with this idea of approaching climate change from an interdisciplinary standpoint relates to our student learning standards here in New Jersey. So in 2020, our state adopted learning standards that necessitated climate change education across all grade bands and all disciplines within the state. So it's the first state to do that. And as you can understand, it's kind of an undiscovered country in some ways. Not only do our science teachers need support for figuring out how to incorporate climate change into their curricula, our non-science teachers also need support because they are now tasked with discussing climate change as it relates to their disciplines. So this could be looking at it from the perspective of visual performing arts, into PE, to traditional sciences, social studies, world languages, etc. And the disconnect here is, our non-science teachers are not necessarily trained in climate change. So how do we bridge that gap? And coming out of this was this larger question, not only just thinking about how do we communicate with teachers and how do we then encourage the teachers to communicate with their students, but how do we generally, as a whole, communicate and contextualize climate change information across different disciplines and sectors, with the idea that it doesn't necessarily have to always be a science conversation whenever we're displaying data and the like. And what we came up with was a way to increase access to non-science experts through a workshop on climate change topics, and then build climate literacy and impacts facility in the audience through non-science lines of evidence for climate change. So different ways of discussing or telling stories about climate change as it's relevant to their communities. So I'll give you some of the context first, and then I'll actually get into some of the activities that we've done. So we developed and play tested this with a grades 6 through 12 teacher climate change workshop last year. So we had some 70 educators from across New Jersey. And our goal was to, as it says on the tin, approach climate change from many subject areas. And what we did is we had Rutgers experts in science, history, foreign languages, literature, arts, etc., whose own work intersects with climate change. And from their perspective, it makes perfect sense on how to connect climate change to, for example, foreign languages or to history, and give them a platform to discuss with the teachers how they approach that. So we had a number of different kind of speakers throughout the day, but we had two big activities. We had a morning activity that we call I See, I Wonder, which I'm going to discuss today. And then in the afternoon, we have breakout workshops with university experts. Basically, we had our university experts lead breakout rooms on climate change as it relates to their subject, and the teachers could filter in and out of a few of those over the course of the afternoon to learn those different perspectives. But as I said, I'm going to go through this I see, I wonder activity, and if it seemed interesting to you, I encourage you to steal it wholesale because I think it's pretty fun. Okay, so for the I see, I wonder activity, we start with showing everyone these graphs here. In this case, this is temperature change, historical and future in New Jersey, and this is sea level rise historical and projections in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I asked our teachers in the audience, what do they see? Now, obviously, the science teachers are probably interpreting this pretty well. But then I asked the same question to our Rutgers experts throughout our different disciplines. So in terms of a climate scientist, I am a climate scientist. I didn't introduce myself, but I'll do that at the end. I broke these graphics down. This is increasing temperature and increasing sea level rise. But then I posed the same question to our world languages experts. And they describe these graphics and what they think of in terms of the global and cultural context of the communities they study and their impacts, from a global context. We had a historian come and discuss how past action is informing our current climate challenges, but also how we can use our challenges from the past as a model towards action into the future. And then we also asked one of our art professors to come up and, what do you see? And he said, these graphs are boring and unengaging. Because they are. They're scientific graphics. They're not necessarily the best way to communicate with folks who are not scientists. And, that got a chuckle out of everyone. But I think it's a point very well made that as scientists or people active in STEM work, we often think of a graph as telling a story, but for many people it's not. So we want to think about how we can really get to those stories in different ways. Okay, so following this what do you see or I see exercise, we then divvied up our educators into a number of different tables where we had 8 educators and 1 faculty member per table. When I say faculty, I mean our university faculty. In this case, if you're trying to get in your own community or say you're a teacher, it could be 1 expert and 8 students. In this case, it's meant to be transferable. And the goal here is with the I see exercise, we put them into the mindset of thinking about climate change from those different viewpoints. And now following this, we have our I wonder exercise that lets them practice it in almost a think, pair, share kind of hands-on way. So we asked them to form pairs. So we had 4 pairs per table, and each one was given a different line of evidence for climate change impacts. And I realized I should probably just have the little laser pointer here for climate change impacts. And I'll get into what those lines of evidence are here in a few minutes. We asked them to read, interpret, and then discuss that amongst themselves. So we gave them some information and some guiding questions, but really it was for them to process and think about. They then shared across their table what they uncover, what they learn, what they find interesting. And they repeated that across each pair. So, we had about, if we had 4 pairs per table, 12 minutes in total. And then we had intergroup discussions. So basically each table talking about the evidence, what they find interesting about what other folks are saying, can they piece this together into a larger context? And throughout this, our Rutgers faculty is not presiding over the table. They're there as a resource. We gave them a list of guiding questions to help in case things got a little quiet. But really, they were there as a resource, not to lead the discussion. The goal here is to let the people learning lead the discussion. And we asked them, well, what were the takeaways or any lingering questions that you may have? And then as a table, come together and think of one big idea that they would like to share. And then as we wrapped up, we went around the room and each table shared a big idea. We wrote down on a big piece of paper. And in general, it was pretty successful. Now, where this really comes into play, or this this method was really successful, was bringing in these different stories through different lines of evidence. Now, we used 4 different lines of evidence. There's one I'm not going to talk about because it was just more scientific data, which is less germane to the topic today. But the 3 that we did put it into a historical, journalism, and art context. So starting with the historical one, we pulled information from this really, really great ArcGIS story map produced by Groundwork Elizabeth relating historical redlining to climate disparities. So pictured here on the left is the redlining map of Union County, New Jersey. And in the 1930s, basically with government policy, certain areas were redlined as not, as people that are being risky or too risky for home loans. It's a blatantly racist housing practice that has had repercussions throughout the decades. So if you look at areas that were redlined historically today, you see a high density of people of color as well as low-income families. So even though the practice of redlining is not happening today, we still see that historical repercussion today and the kind of socioeconomics of these locations. Now, if we were to take that redlining and kind of digitize it here, so we've digitized it, the red actually represents these redlined areas, and overlay that with impervious cover, so basically pavement, cement, etc. in the urban area, we can see that we have this higher rate in and around our redlined areas of more pavement, basically. And then we can relate that to the surface temperature measured by satellite of the land. And again, we see higher rates of hotter temperatures in these redlined areas compared to the other areas around those. So this is a pretty straightforward story from a scientific perspective. We have our higher density of impervious cover. That's related to higher temperatures. That's the urban heat island effect. But we just gave them these 2 images and then the background information about redlining. So a page of text about the historical context and then some guiding questions. How these physical parameters relate to the redlined areas, and then can we get their brains thinking about some what are ways to mitigate or address the disparities that we see? What are some approaches that could be beneficial? And so we're able to put this climate effect, because we're also approaching this from the idea that with climate change, these heat issues may become stronger, into this historical kind of socioeconomic, socio-political context. The other pieces of lines of evidence that we used were some news articles. So this is, again, approaching it from like a journalism perspective. So we had one article about how the hot and dry summer we had in 2022 affected some of our crops here in New Jersey. And the article itself speaks to how that may change or can be a consistent issue in the future as the climate changes. And then the second article was looking at sunny day flooding, or what we call tidal flooding. So low-level nuisance flooding that's very frequent on the coast of New Jersey, and how local communities are, one, dealing with it, but how frequently they're being impacted and their concerns that they're thinking about. So we asked them to think about, well, how is climate change presented in these non-expert pieces of media? And what are the kind of local impacts? Can we contextualize these kind of broader climate change thoughts, the world's warming, things are getting drier, into their kind of downstream effects, and listen to what the community members are saying and what they're facing in these contexts. So can we bridge that gap and make it more localized? Then the third one I want to talk about is an art piece. So we didn't actually have a tangible art piece to present to them, which I have seen in since being presented in various places, and I kind of wish we had actually had something that they could pass around. But instead, we had this image of this installation at the Passaic River, created by Adrian Colburn, that shows peak stream flow from blue to red, with like magnitude of flow here as like the larger flood stages. And looking at this, you can see it goes from about 1900 to 2020, blue to red, more frequently larger. So it's a discussion of with climate change, or maybe even with landscaping practices, maybe more urbanization upstream, how this area has seen more stream flow and potential flooding. And, we ask them the same things. How do you interpret this? What do you think? Like, what does this make you feel? What do you think about it? We did provide them more information about what specifically what's discussed here. And they came up with some fun things. They were wondering if these little things were to spin in like a tactile way to see if they could connect more with like even younger children and the like. But all three of these really kind of hit hard with our teachers. So for the workshop as a whole, we did like a quick little survey at the end. How satisfied were you? And most people enjoyed it, 4s and 5s. Very good to excellent. And then specifically for this I wonder exercise at the end with the lines of evidence, we asked them what they thought of it, and they found that it was very good or excellent in terms of presenting climate change information. We even had an unsolicited quote from a professor, well, a high school teacher, saying, "Seeing different disciplines each talk about the same graph left me gobsmacked." So again, in our work, it may seem very straightforward how to connect climate change and its impacts to different sectors, but it's not that clear to everyone else. So we can approach those impacts by incorporating these different types of storytelling mechanics, whether we're looking at maps, whether we're looking at articles, etc. So since we did this initially, we've demoed the parts of this exercise in other settings. And I do see someone has their hand up, but I'm nearly done, so we can take that in a second. So if we move climate change communication information from graphs and hard numbers, we can improve audience engagement. That isn't to say that we shouldn't use graphs at all. I'm actually a very big proponent of the idea that we maybe oversimplify things sometimes for folks, but we have a number of different communication methodology and media that are at our fingertips that we should engage with. Maps, stories, art pieces that all span a range of disciplines can all help to really put climate change information into a local or personal context and really connect with our audience. So again, getting out of the scientist space a little bit and a little bit more, and maybe into the artist space, or maybe a little bit more into the social scientist space could help. And people then can more intuitively connect climate change to their communities and think about community action. Again, once we're linking it up to those other disciplines, you can start to think about how we can mitigate climate change or adapt to it in different ways. So with that, like I said, I realized I didn't introduce myself fully at the top of this, so I'm just going to do it right now. Again, I'm James Shope. I'm an Assistant Extension Specialist in Climate Services at Rutgers University. I'm also in the Department of Environmental Sciences there. And I'm broadly an applied climatologist, working on climate change hazards and effects here in the state of New Jersey. So I have a thank you list here of folks, including Janice, that worked with me on this workshop day and the development of the I Wonder activity. And